Hey everybody, it is Josh Spilker, content and SEO at AirOps, and I'm really glad that Allyson Havener from TrustRadius is with us. How are you, Allyson?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Allyson, where are you from? Or where are you joining us from today?
I am joining from San Francisco, born and raised in the Bay Area. So didn't venture very far and have been in the city for about 15 years.
I'm in New York City in Manhattan, so if you hear some sirens behind me, that's what's happening. But today we are going to be talking about sales, marketing, alignment, revenue as well. So why that needs to be your scorecard. And so Allison is going to lead us through that conversation. She also has a really great op-ed that she put on our blog that you can also find too. So would love to see that. So Allison, you are currently at TrustRadius, the CMO there. How long have you been at TrustRadius?
A little over 4 years. And then you're actually recently acquired by our parent company, HG Insights. So really interesting time that we're going through right now. And previously I was in the ad tech world at LiveRamp.
Awesome. Yeah. So we are going to dive into our topic here. But first, if you are ready to thrive in AI search, scan the QR code here or email us at growth@airops.com. And we have some special content refresh packages that we'll be talking about that we can share with you, specifically also around like third party and offsite, which TrustRadius is a big part. So if you want to see some workflows for AI search, email us at growth@airops.com with webinar in the subject line. And then you also get access to our LLM prioritization dashboard and then a strategy to help refresh your content. So you can sign up for that. And I'll also mention that towards the end, but would love everyone to check that out. And then our agenda today. So yes, sales and marketing alignment. So many things have changed with buyers in the last probably 3 months, much less the last few years. So we're going to be talking about that, why the old handoff between sales and marketing has changed. Maybe it's completely dead. We'll get into that. And then why alignment rather than attribution should be your scorecard metric. And then also, what are some things that CMO should be looking at? Content as the trust engine, and then some 3 moves at the end that everyone should put into practice, or also be taking some questions. So feel free to drop those in the chat if you do have some questions for Allison. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk through those. All right, here we go. We all know that, or we've all felt it, at least I have as a content marketer and working also with marketing teams, that attribution is broken, but alignment is the fix. So what have you seen as far as even a shift in the last year, 5 years, maybe even 10 years?
Yeah, I feel like any marketer or any salesperson, anyone in the kind of go-to-market function is experiencing these things. Buyer behavior has completely changed. A lot of it is done anonymously. They want to self-educate. They want to find all the important product information without really ever consulting your brand. And so that really changes the role of your marketing and your sales team. And they can do that, right? When they're consulting with their peers, reading reviews, AI overviews, et cetera. And really, if you think about how disjointed that information can be consumed, attribution models just don't cut it. And they actually create probably more noise and confusion and friction than anything. And so I think alignment is really important when it comes to thinking through how sales and marketing are going to move together to really reach those buyers and be aligned on those strategies that you're going to deploy. Because otherwise, it just turns into kind of this finger pointing, or you're putting in a lot of effort in something that's not actually accurate. So I think but it all really starts with the buyer's journey and how much that's changed over the last 10 years.
Was there a time, either like personally or just like through your work experience, where you're like, just as a concrete example of, oh, wow, things are really different now? Was there like just maybe something that clicked in your mind for that?
100%. So I looked through, we were having a big, if you look at however you do your stages for opportunities, and I love to analyze the sales cycle because you can learn so much about your go-to-market and your messaging, et cetera, how it's resonating, just looking at your sales cycle. And are you getting people that are coming in and raising their hands? Are those actually people that are qualified in your ICP that you want to be talking to? That means that your marketing is hitting the right people and it's resonating. Looking at the yield on your outbounding. And so it's, hey, how well are you outbounding, et cetera. But really then once you're in your sales cycle, what's happening at each of those stages? So one concrete example is we had this huge drop off at proposal. And I was like, what is happening at proposal that all of a sudden we just see our pipeline like plummet to close lost? The first time that they were seeing pricing. Oh, and it was just like this aha moment. And when you look at a lot of the buyer research that we've done, one of the number one things that buyers wanted to change about the buying cycle and like their buyer journey was that they want to see pricing upfront. Great. So our BDR started, we created an entire pricing page. We told BDRs that like, hey, this is the starting package, this is the baseline. And we're more expensive than our competitors. But we have a premium offering. We feel like we can really defend that pricing. And so let's show it to them up front. And that completely changed. One, we we're getting more qualified people in. Two, people who weren't getting that sticker shock. Three, it actually value sell to that pricing. So I think that's just like one example of buyers' behavior changing in their expectations. They wanted to see pricing up front. And then that completely changed the way our conversion rates were looking and actually getting more qualified people in, wasting less time on people that are unqualified, and overall accelerating our deal cycle.
Yeah, I love that example. And that's definitely something everybody on the call can think about, or like A/B test for sure. We hit on this, and you mentioned that buyers have obviously changed and that the former buyer that was there doesn't really exist anymore. And you mentioned products or pricing information, but we're also seeing some other influences here about good resources for buyers.
Yeah, so I think this and pricing like lives within all of this.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at influence, right? And again, thinking about your marketing and alignment, not everybody, especially if you sell to the enterprise and maybe having a proof of concept or a free trial or whatever it is. But I think when you look at the first three here, free trial, your own experience, and product demos, people want hands-on experience, whether that's from their own their own experience from a previous company or not. And I think even with the boom of AI, people are very apprehensive about vaporware, right? And we're so over being overpromised and underdelivered because everybody in the audience has bought software, and I guarantee you everybody has been disappointed by software in some form or fashion. And so when you look at what's really influential, it is giving all that product information upfront, letting them look under the hood as much as possible. But if you think of it as your own experience, if your product is over promising and under delivering, and let's say your buyer goes to another company, like that's gonna be really a hard challenge to get over. So that's also thinking about your overall strategy is you're not selling the art of the possible, but you're really thinking about what your product can do. And then I think the last two here, people want to hear from their peers. They want to hear what's going on in the market. User reviews are a great non-biased way, but then also with consultants, there's a lot of information out there for people to use to be like, hey, here's my hands-on experience that I could get of the product, and then what are my peers doing?
Yeah, I was thinking about that with peers because I guess it's not quite captured here in some ways, because it's like if you talk to another marketing advisor that you've worked with before or just somebody else that you know from your network, that's going to hold more weight even than just like an anonymous user review or a user review from someone you don't know. I should phrase it that way.
100%. Like people are definitely leaning into like their communities and so forth. So yeah, thinking about that through your strategy is that peer credibility.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to think about. Okay, how do I get to that prior experience, that product demos? It's if you have a trusted friend who has used it before, they can vouch for it.
100%.
And so as we think about how just that buyer journey has changed and how people are making decisions a little bit differently, that definitely influences how marketing, sales align together or like work together. And one interesting thing that you've shared, and I've heard it before, is that 95% of people are still forming their opinions and only 5% are in the market. So how does that really influence how marketing and sales works together?
Yeah, when you look at these stats, and I think everybody's heard of the 95/5 rule, and you're looking at, let's say, your total addressable market and then like your actual serviceable market, right? It starts to get really small when you then cut that all the way down to who's actually in market. And so I think there's two things here to think about. One is typically marketers and sales are super, super focused on this 5%, right? If you think about performance marketing metrics, if you think about what kind of measurement you're looking at from a marketing to sales perspective, It's really hyper focused on this 5%. Now, where I think that sales and marketing can be much more aligned is on the 95%, because this cohort of people are actually not in market, but you want to gain mind share because somebody's going to have a problem and they're going to hear your brand, or they're going to be in a conversation with their peers or at a dinner or whatever it is. And is your brand coming up? Are they talking about you? Do you actually have that mind share? So when they are in market and they do want to buy a technology that's in your category, are you a standout? Because that's like the first thing people are going to think about. And it's a very simplistic way to think about it, but it's actually like really helpful for sales and marketing to get on that level. Because you're like, great, if I'm doing the type of marketing that is gaining mind share, that they're reading our content, when they're actually in market and we reach out to them, they're much more likely to buy it. And I think everyone in the audience, like, we're constantly dodging calls, we're constantly dodging emails, like the amount of like emails you delete or you just leave in your inbox, right? It's pretty overwhelming. And so if you're not focusing on this 95% with your sales team and being aligned on that, everything that you do for that 5% is going to be 10 times harder.
So maybe I should take a little bit of a step back here because we're like the old handoff is dead. Maybe we could just frame like maybe what the traditional way or handoffs, or like the way people think about that versus maybe what you're advocating for, what we're going to be talking about.
100%. So I think if you think about the classic way that we've thought about this, is great. A lead comes in, they interact with whatever content, we've scored it in some way. That gets passed to sales. Sales then works that lead and they book a meeting that turns into an opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really not the case at all, right? Like, we've created this very like linear handoff that happens. But instead, what I'm suggesting is, for instance, every campaign that we create, we almost think of sales as like a channel. So how are we creating cadences that align with like all of the campaigns that we're putting out into market? And they could even be thought leadership, right? We at TrustRadius, we set on like a gold mine of buyer data, and we are constantly mining it and pulling insights for vendors to better connect with their target audience. Great. How are we taking all of that thought leadership and putting it into cadences for our sales team so they can just reach out? All they're doing is actually just circulating the report. They're just trying to get into people's inboxes, or they can use this on a sales call, or we create like all kinds of different materials for people to share the report, use the graphs. You just used this report, which is great. But like the idea is like people can use all that data for like their own marketing, their own internal decks, whatever it is. And so it's like this value add. It's not that hard sell. It wasn't, hey, they're ready to buy, sales, go and reach out to them and book a meeting. It's really like this, they're not even in market, but like, how are we giving them value? How are we reinforcing that we're a trusted brand? And how do we do that through our sales team? And we do that together. So marketing is doing kind of the air cover, and then sales is doing that one-to-one, but we're doing it together all in one campaign. And it's not like marketing did this, it scored, then you get the lead, then you do this. And we all know that's really broken, and we all get the feedback from the sales team, like they weren't ready to buy, and et cetera, et cetera. And it just creates a lot of finger pointing versus, hey, we're all working together on this campaign. This is what sales is going to own. This is the messaging that they're going to own. And this is the goals that they have. And this is what marketing is going to do in tandem.
Yeah, I love that. And that leads us to our next kind of point here. There's a lot on this slide, a lot of acronyms too, that some of us we're probably mostly familiar with, but there might be a few in there. But really what this is showing is, here's some of what marketing is responsible for. Here's what sales is responsible for. Where do they meet? And so you've and your team and the CRO have developed this Venn diagram for assessing that.
Yes. So this is a huge like milestone, if you will, on a CRO and CMO being philosophically aligned. And then again, like this reinforces. So what I said before, hey, this is the campaign that we're going to run. This is what sales does. This is what marketing is, et cetera, et cetera. That's all well and great. Like we can all sit around and have kumbaya, but if we don't have the metrics to support that and the KPIs of early indicators, lagging indicators, et cetera, like all of that's going to fall flat and we're going to lose credibility. Like you definitely need the numbers to report back. And this again isn't about attribution. This is about, are we effective as a go-to-market unit? And so I really want, and it's really hard because we're so ingrained as a marketing team. And I actually, after the acquisition, we're merging a lot of our go-to-market with HG Insights, which is very different than the way we ran things at TrustRadius. And so I already start to see the vernacular of like marketing source and marketing, this is what marketing is bringing in, et cetera. And I think that just sets us all up for failure. So these metrics here, and I can go through a little about them, but right, you'll see here under the marketing column, like these are all things that I think about around optimization. And I heard a friend of mine, we were on a CMO panel together, and she was like, this is like the engine room of the marketing team. Like, we don't really need to share a ton of this out. This is like pure marketers, like want to see this. We want to get it. This is for like measurement and optimization, right? Not necessarily attributing all of this to like our website. It's really about the optimization of the campaigns and whatever we're putting out into market. Same thing on the sales, right? Like how effective is our team in engaging our target audience? How good or how well are we doing our outbounding motion, et cetera, quota attainment, closing the deals, right? You can see how like they completely own that. And that's their engine room, if you will. But at the end of the day, like when I get into the boardroom with my CRO, like the ones in the middle is all we're talking about. And we don't get into the nitty gritty of the other things because all that matters to the board and all that matters for the company, right, is that we're hitting like our pipeline generation numbers. We have a good CAC to LTV ratio, right? We have a high ACV with our closed won ops, and we're seeing that trend over time, right? And all of these metrics are super important when it comes to the alignment piece with sales. So if maybe you're not like at the CMO level and you're more in the IC or director level, et cetera, and you're stuck in the engine room metrics, if you will, it's actually pretty easy to start to say, hey, great, like this campaign was really effective. And that's how you talk within your marketing team. And then your CMO should really be translating that to these metrics here in the middle. And once we've aligned on this, my CRO and I were like, hey, this is great. And if we saw anything here on the marketing and sales, like in the red, like that was my job to then go and be like, okay, like how do we fix this? What's happening? And then it also really helped, again, where we're not pointing fingers, but we're actually showing, hey, where are the gaps, whether it's like from our marketing campaigns or sales, and how do we fix them together? Because you can see a lot of these one leads to the other, right?
Yeah. I think maybe the pushback, or maybe some of my pushback would just be like, how do I know if a channel is working or not? So then I'm like, how do I attribute this came from a LinkedIn ad versus like this came from an outbound call or outbound email? So like, how do you think about the channels then? Or is it just like all channels need to be humming?
To be completely honest, I think all channels will be humming, and I know every marketer, and I know like we all live in, and I think this is also in our world is a chance for you to also level up your like position. And like, I know I'm the content person, I'm the digital marketer, I'm the ABM person, whatever. And so you get very bogged down in your metrics. But at the end of the day, if we go back to the buyer's journey and it not being linear and living in that 95%, all you need to be wherever your buyer's eyeballs are. And then you need to you still need to measure that from an effectiveness standpoint. So I think what I would get away from is using a word like attribution versus just measuring it. Okay, we ran this LinkedIn campaign. This was our click-through rate. This was our impressions, et cetera, et cetera. And then, great, could we look at all the opportunity or all the like accounts that were engaging with that campaign, looking at any expansion dollars that are associated with those accounts. Okay, great. That means people were picking up what we were putting down. I think because this moment you're like, hey, we can attribute these dollars to that LinkedIn campaign, that means that you could be like, I call it false precision. That doesn't mean that someone saw that LinkedIn and bought the technology. Like, who in the audience has seen one LinkedIn ad and then went and bought that technology? Right? No
Correct.
way.
Yeah. It's like influence along the journey for sure.
Exactly. So I totally get your pushback, but I think it's just reframing it in terms of like, how do you optimize the channel and measure it and measure the effectiveness of it versus trying to attribute dollars to that channel?
So then it's if you know the right companies are interacting with your LinkedIn campaign, then you're like trusting that it'll have those trickle down effects to your pipeline generation, to your revenue.
Exactly. And then I think that's why with the previous slide that you have, that 95/5 rule is really
Yeah.
important to keep in mind.
Yeah. So it's like hitting your right ICP with these campaigns on the left here. Definitely a mindset shift that a lot of us probably have to think about, but you've seen some really good results from this. I pulled out this quote and maybe, yeah, just emphasize what it says here, or just like what your last line there about keeping decisions crisp.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to kind of maybe your point, and I really appreciate like challenging it because it is a complete different mindset. But again, if you start like that, the LinkedIn campaign is a great example. But the minute you start using attribution and you're gonna start like pumping all of these dollars into LinkedIn, so great, like we associated all these dollars, but there's diminishing returns on that, right? So instead of making decisions on the way your buyers want to buy and interact with you, you're making it based on this kind of false precision that's going to have diminishing returns. So once we One's from a sales, CS, marketing perspective, we really started to align around that Venn diagram and we made decisions based on where our buyers' eyeballs were and how are we going to continually meet their expectations, give them a good, consistent brand experience. And that got away from this, hey, LinkedIn is performing really well. Hey, paid search is like the silver bullet. We all know that's not true. So it just helped us with really clear, like yardstick, if you will, of like measurement. And then it also helped us make the decisions. Because again, you can measure anything and you can, if you want to attribute stuff, but like what decisions are you making as a go-to-market team? And I think that's really what helped us with those like KPIs. It's like, hey, looking at these KPIs and we see that things are in the red, like what decisions are we going to make? What adjustments are we going to make to improve those? And if we improve those, then we're improving the buyer's journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. I'm just thinking of so many examples from me personally about some like misattribution on things that has definitely been frustrating in the past. So this is a good topic for all of us to think about. And so getting in a little bit to that nitty gritty there, you don't need leads, you need better signals. And then here we lay out a few, if you just want to go over these, I really like number one for sure. So I want to dive into that as well.
Yeah. So, again, that 95/5 rule. And one thing that at TrustRadius that I really changed and flipped on its head was I don't care about leads. And everyone's like, oh my God. And it wasn't, and it goes back to what my big bet was that we need to gain mind share and we need to be top of mind and for buyers, for our buyers and for vendors, and we need to be relevant. And so we need mass consumption of our content. And that needs to be whatever. And if you look at TrustRadius as like a publisher, right? We need to make sure that the content on our site is really helpful for any tech buyer that's trying to make a technology decision. And then we also have the content stream of all the vendors that we're trying to help engage that target audience that's on TrustRadius. So it's like that marketplace. So we had a double duty when it came to content consumption, like making sure tech buyers are coming to TrustRadius and then making sure vendors were thinking of TrustRadius when they're thinking of like a channel to reach their target buyers. So I was like very adamant on this kind of content consumption and looking at all of the metrics on those content, on our content. And a lot of people are going to say, well, that's vanity metrics. Oh, there's bots and blah, blah, blah. And it's okay. But the bottom line, and what I said that we are going to measure this by is inbound So is our inbound going to increase? Is it also more qualified inbound and the personas that we want to be talking to? And then I talked about this earlier too, is the outbounding yield. So how, like on our targeted list account that we go after, what's the conversion rate of actually getting them to like a meeting when our SDRs and our sales team starts to prospect into these accounts? And we really saw that go up and to the right. Both our inbound increase, but from a qualified standpoint, we weren't just getting a bunch of junk and people that were not qualified. And also our outbounding, the yield increased. And so that was huge for us because that showed like, hey, this content consumption and really thinking about that 95%. And then they'll come to us when they're in market, or if our sales team reaches out and knocks on the door, they're going to answer.
Yeah. And when you described that to me before, I was like very curious about what makes up content consumption. So is that like traffic metrics? Is it email opens? Like we had a few of those on the other side.
Yeah,
Is it like social
exactly.
media impressions? Like kind of what factors into that?
Yeah, all of the above. So we look at, and we can go by channel, but like social impressions, the engagement on social. We pretty much only really invest in LinkedIn because that's our sales and marketing ads are. On email, it was open rates, click-through rates on all of our content on our site, especially we invested a lot in, like I was saying, like all of our reports. We put all of our reports in blog format. We didn't gate anything. And so we would look at performance in terms of backlinks because that helps us with our domain authority and so much more. We wanted to make sure that people were using all the data outside of the report as well. So that was big for us. Obviously, page views, unique page views, time on page, looking at the bounce rate. So all the classic things that you would think about and
Okay.
that don't feel like in vogue anymore.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at, and this is going to be different from everyone, but when you're thinking about your like discoverability and LLMs, and this could be like a whole session on itself. But right now, TrustRadius, we're really looking at one, how many calls do we get from a chat GPT a day, meaning like their bot coming and scraping our site for information
Mhm.
and synthesize for an answer. And so that's like dramatically increased, almost 50,000 calls a day that we get from ChatGPT scraping our site for some answer about something
Wow.
that we have information about. And then what we also looked at was at referral traffic from ChatGPT, and we were just focusing on that one, and we've been expanding it to other LLMs. But referral traffic from ChatGPT was very small at the beginning of the year. I want to say it was around like in the single digits, and now
Mhm.
it's almost at 22% of our
Oh,
traffic
wow.
is referral traffic from ChatGPT. And that's just ChatGPT, not the others. So that's insane when you look at search behavior changing. So anyway, so I think there's the classic kind of like metrics that we would associate with consumption. And then there's like the new way of discoverability and consuming content that's happening now that we should also be looking at. And there's some really interesting tools out there that can help you do that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll maybe chat a little bit about AI search in the Q&A there too, because I know a lot of people have some questions about TrustRadius on that. But diving in just a little bit more there, I forgot I had this slide, but yes, content consumption over like single touch. But we're seeing, to your point, AI's impact on the buying process here in this chart.
Yeah. Look, and I love this like top line when you sent this to me. I was like, wow, you nailed it. But are you in content?
Yes, for sure.
Look, like content is the lifeblood of marketing and your brand. And I think there's two things to keep in mind for every marketer should be a content marketer in some form or fashion, right? Like this is so important. But in the age of AI, right, the easiest use case that people are right is content creation. And then what we need to make sure is like that we're not getting into this awful cycle of just regurgitation and everything starts sounding the same, et cetera. So when you think about the content that you're creating and actually creating a trust engine, make sure that you're starting with original content, meaning, hey, it's your POV as a company. It has a personality. You're actually putting something out there that people want to read. Because I think right now we're like, oh my gosh, like every marketer, I can make thousands of pieces of content. This is great. Like we're thinking about the supply side and not the demand. And so, what does your audience, what are the things that they want to learn about? What are the major trends that are happening in your industry that you can have a point of view on? And I think this is really like the moat that you can create around your content and obviously customer voice. Like your customers are really the last frontier of differentiation. Your competitors can copy your messaging, they can copy your product, but they can't copy what your customers say about you.
Yeah, I think our COO has started calling that frontier knowledge. And it's really that idea of what is your point of view to create that moat? What is your differentiator? And what's your like counter opinion, or at least your new slant on some of the things that are happening, along with like good data backed research and evidence, is really what we're seeing on our end impact LLMs for sure. And so
Right.
maybe getting back into the sales alignment with marketing, how are you handling like the feedback loops, and how are you developing like some of those objections that people might have into marketing content?
Yeah, so I'll give, I think a lot of what you see right here, like nobody's really surprised by this, but it's really about double clicking into these reasons and your marketing should get in front of that. And that's what I really mean about a feedback loop and with your sales team. And this is what creates also like a ton of alignment when you're thinking about more of that maybe top of funnel content. So what we did, and I'll give you like a very tactical example, is we started to analyze all of our call recordings of sales, and we pulled out the most common objections that we were hearing. Budget was a big one, timing was a big one, competitors, etc. Everybody feels this, right? So we double clicked into that and we're like, great, how do we get ahead of these objections? And we created almost like these thought leadership educational pieces of content. We called it internally, we called it our objection handling playbook. But essentially, like a common objection that we get is, I don't have the budget. I'm working with other review sites and TrustRadius is much more expensive. So we created a whole thought leadership track about how to manage multiple reviews sites, why to do that. We have very little audience overlap with like other review sites. Our audience is much more unique, enterprise, mid-market, etc. And so we found like the angle to overcome that objection, but then we created a whole content tracking campaign around it to get in front of it. And so the idea was like, if we can start educating people why work with multiple review platforms and why TrustRadius is different, et cetera, then maybe we won't even get that objection in the sales cycle. We used a lot of that was in the sales cycle to fuel our content strategy and essentially get in front of the objections that our sales team was getting.
I love that, like having a formal or semi-formal objection handling playbook like makes a lot of sense for sure. And then, yeah, we already mentioned this a bit, like discoverability for AI search. What are you seeing on your end? And one thing is influence what can't be tracked. I love that. And I did find a screenshot here from two different brands that TrustRadius has a review on that did appear in ChatGPT. So yeah, maybe just elaborate on anything here.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit, but I think this goes back to why attribution models are really broken right at the beginning and causes a lot of friction. Because your team could be like, why are we investing here? Why are we investing there? And again, like that's getting into the nitty gritty versus going back to that Venn diagram that we have around like those metrics, because how the sausage is made and how you're doing all these things might not resonate with somebody that's not a marketer, not in the industry, but
Yeah.
those KPIs will. So just so you can get that in your head and how it all like fits together. But specifically on this and why the way search and discoverability is going to be changing so much. I think that this is probably the scariest and like most exciting chapter for all brands going into this next year, is because the rapid adoption of AI search and it's not like the beast that we knew Google, right? We more or less we knew the beast Google, right? There was a paid channel, there was search engine optimization. GEO is still a while less out there, but I think the points that you have are super, super important and a great starting point, and where we really invested in at TrustRadius, and which is why you're seeing us cited so much. And I talked to those stats a little bit of all the referral traffic and all the calls that we're getting from ChatGPT, but it really comes down to creating content for humans again. Like,
Mm,
we're not creating content now for these SEO bots, and we're actually really creating it for humans, and we're making original content again. And I think that the brand guidelines thing is really interesting because, and everybody has this, but your brand voice and your point of view is going to only become more and more valuable,
right.
because brand is gonna be one of those things that, are you a brand that people really want to align themselves to in their careers? So anyway, so when you're thinking about your larger content strategy, et cetera, two things is, one, how are you adapting that to make sure it's built for humans and that it's going to be picked up in the LLMs? And two, you shouldn't try to attribute anything to this content. Really just stick to the KPIs and know that this is influencing that. There are tools out there where you can start, right? There's some really, actually some good tools that we use to measure this piece, but don't try to get bogged down in that right now, because it's only going to slow you down in a market that's moving very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And AirOps, you can build workflows from your brand guidelines and from your brand kits and your knowledge base. And one thing I would suggest is you could even take like reviews from TrustRadius and just see how people are talking about your brand could really influence like that sentiment, but also maybe give you some new talking points around how you position your product or how you also sell.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And that's what a lot of our customers are doing. We can give them, a lot of our customers license all the review data. So we can give them all the raw review content. They put that into their own GPT internally or whatever they're using. And they can mine all of that for insights, quotes, customer stories, etc. Really powerful stuff.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great tactic for sure. And we're hitting on that like quality as the new quantity because being transparent, you've done, like you mentioned earlier, like you've ungated a lot of your reports and things, but then you also did something really novel that I was a little bit surprised by is like you've published your review criteria and your rejection rates of those reviews and just like trying to build that trust around your customers.
Yeah, if you even back up to what I just said, could you imagine if you pulled all the raw review content and a huge part of that is fraudulent, AI written, or just lacking in quality?
Yeah.
Pretty
Wow.
much worthless, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you start to look at, when you compare apples to apples with us and our competitors, there's a stark difference. And so, 2 points that I'll make on this is, one, when you think about your brand and creating content, what makes you unique? And this is really what made Trust Radius very unique, is the way that the criteria of which we publish reviews, they're all human moderated. We have AI trackers, etc. And then we started to, like, a lot of our competitors were like, oh, we've published hundreds of thousands of reviews. They're like these big dumb numbers that they were throwing out there. And I was like, why don't we talk about what we reject? And I think that, to me, it was like we really lean into quality. And so, anyway, so yeah, this was again pulling the hood up and saying, this is how we do things. And this is very different than the rest of the industry, both actually in the B2C and B2B world.
And this is really practicing what you preach as far as like the slide previous about putting your point of view out there in the market and like putting your specific slant on things. For my fellow content marketers out there, that's exactly what this was like. Hey, here's how we're different. We're not like everybody else. Here's what we do accept and what we do reject. And having those criteria is like the frontier knowledge to the T for sure.
Yeah. So if you're curious, it's on our site. It's the review quality report, all ungated, all easy to access, but some interesting stuff if you're looking at how we moderate reviews and how we're doing that kind of in the age of AI.
Yeah, love that. So maybe as we start to wrap up, and if you do have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I know I have a few here that are outstanding, but here are some moves that CMOs can think about is how do you build brand credibility, building for humans first, and then, yeah, your brand guidelines.
Yeah. This, I feel like, is a really good kind of take home for, again, going back to everybody, every marketer is a content marketer, but think about building that credible brand. Think about your point of view in the market and what you want to put out there. This is just some like really tactical things, but it all starts with you doing this first. Like something that AI and LLMs are not good at, right? Is like some of this creation, this ideation and differentiating. And this is all I think should stem from your team, from your subject matter experts, and then think about scale.
Yeah, for sure. And then one thing I did want to mention is if you have this clean alignment, are you seeing like faster deals as we talk about and recap here about sales aligning with marketing?
Yeah. So I think that we touched on a lot of different topics today, and I'm sure people are spending a little bit, but just some of the results that we saw when we really started to think about like our content strategy, aligning that with sales, really focusing on those KPIs that in the Venn diagram, it just got us away from the finger pointing. It got us away from making poor decisions. It got us away from this false precision. And so we were able to, and this was a transformation over some time, but within 12 months, so this was over a year that we looked at this. So we were able to increase our ACV by over 56%. We essentially doubled our win rates, which was like
Wow.
incredible. And again, like it just went back to creating that trusted brand and then knowing that those were like our North Star metrics. And that has been something that we can just compound on over time. So we have a really strong foundation now with the team that we will continue to iterate on. Like it's a journey, right? It's not, okay, check, we're done. This is definitely a journey as the market continues to change. We're all in tech in maybe some form or fashion. So we know that we always have to be on our toes.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of good points. I have a couple more questions, but first I did want to mention a little bit about AirOps. To be able to like take action on your market share and to get revenue like Lightspeed, Webflow, and Chime have done, you can see their results. So if you're wanting to conquer or trying to figure out your LLM visibility strategy and see how you're appearing in LLMs, but also take action on those opportunities, AirOps can help you with that. Feel free to email us at growth@airops.com to get your refresh session, strategy session, and get 3 workflows you can start using right away. Just email us at growth@airops.com and then put webinar in the subject line, and we will take care of you. So lots of good results there. A few questions that some folks may have. This one came in. Allyson, again, thank you for your time. We've got about 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
And if anybody has any further questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat here. But one did come in is they were wondering, how do you maybe prioritize this alignment when you have a smaller team, when the leader is also an executor? Is there any like maybe challenges or advice you could give there?
Yeah, honestly, and I don't know the full scope of your role, but I almost think it's easier when your team is a little bit smaller because it all really starts off kind of philosophically. I don't think anything I said today is like, oh wow, like didn't realize. It was like almost like you knew it and you just needed someone to say it. And
Right.
so I think that hopefully you could take some of this talk track, some of this data and start to change the mindset first. And then if you're also an executor, which I am as well, I feel like I'm like, I can get my hands on the keyboard, I can help my team, then you can also start embodying a lot of this. And like I said, today, when I got this message and docs and stuff from our sales team that the marketing was supposed to this, blah, 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 like, it was very like I'm like, okay, let's take this back. Let's actually reframe this. And so I think it's like, one, sharing this ideology and like kind of philosophy of like how you're going to run the marketing team, but then also really embodying that. And you can do that if you're hands on keyboard, also executing and showing your team how to have these conversations.
Yeah, I love that. Really, that modeling aspect is important. And maybe could you tell us a little bit like practically hands-on some meetings or rituals or just maybe like regular practices that you have with the sales team to help, and maybe even like lower level marketers who are like interacting with the sales team, like Kind of what does the day-to-day look like as far as what you're looking at metric-wise with the sales team, but then also maybe any rituals or rhythms that you have with them?
I love that. What a great question. And we probably, I probably should have created a slide for that to outline it. But we have a few meetings. We have one it's our marketing and field sync, and we say field team because it's all of our CS and it's not all of them, excuse me. It's just the leadership, and that's true. Like that, and knowing when you're putting meetings on the calendar, be very prescriptive of what you're trying to achieve. So this meeting is pure like brainstorm here at the, and we always do these kind of like at the beginning of the quarter, like every other week. And we go through, and our company runs on OKRs. So we say, okay, here's the OKRs. What are the campaigns that we're going to do together? Get feedback from the field team. So it's this very like collaborative, like almost, we call it a brainstorm, but it's really about to align of like, I was talking about that campaign about our report. We did this, and sales is going to do this. That meeting is to define that and be all aligned that we are going to do it, because we need to bring the field leaders along, and they have to be bought in, because when marketing starts rolling everything out to the ICs and all the other people on the team, we need the leaders to reinforce what marketing is saying. And we do that as a go-to-market function. So we have that meeting, and that's on a bi-weekly cadence. And that's really just a touch base, just to make sure like whatever's coming out, we're all aligned and we can all push it down through our teams. The other one, we call it our pipeline meeting. So this is like where we're getting into that nitty gritty of some of those KPIs that I shared, looking at the meetings, the qualified meetings, how are those going? How are they going through the sales cycle? So when I talked about how we are now analyzing the sales cycle, and I found that everything was dropping in proposal, it was in the pipeline meeting. And actually our RevOps team, and if you don't have a RevOps team, just pick an owner, right? If it's marketing, great, but it doesn't matter, because I've been in so many meetings where marketing and sales are looking at different numbers. So this pipeline meeting is to align on the numbers. Whatever's coming from your CRM, Salesforce, whatever, HubSpot, whatever you use, like this pipeline meeting is specifically to make sure that you're reporting on the correct numbers and are aligned on them to the rest of the company. So and then you're talking through gaps, right? We're all talking about the same numbers, and then we're all talking about the same wins and gaps. And then that influences everything else that we're going to do. And so those are like the two main meetings. And then we have like supplemental things from there, just to whatever kind of to-dos or follow-ups when you hear that the great phrase, let's take this offline. But like with those two meetings alone, and you have an owner, you have the agenda, and you know what your kind of remit is for that meeting, that can change everything.
Got it. And then how are you kind of meeting? What's your marketing team rhythm as far as meetings go?
Yeah, so every Monday, I think if you're looking at the quarter, and a lot of marketing teams, right, you plan almost like 6 months in advance, just depending on your cadence and all of that. And all of that can really dramatically change. But let's say you already have like your plan for the quarter, you already have your OKR set, your marketing plan. So I have one meeting on Monday morning, nice, bright and early, and we go through our priorities, super tactical, almost like a project management. And we go through each of the campaigns, like, and it's again, nitty gritty, like email header, did we get the copy? Like it is like very tactical. Did we get the enablement ready for sales? Like we have this meeting coming up for the sales team. Do we have the agenda ready? Like it's the most tactical meeting, but it's like rapid fire. We have this agenda and we just build on it in a doc, super, super simple. And then all that kind of gets translated into Asana. And so we have our project managers kind of helping us in Asana and managing that, but very tactical. And then the other meeting I have is later in the week. And that is when we talk about just macro things that are happening at the company. We look at company metrics. You saw a lot of those like NRR, ARR metrics that we're looking at, CAC to LTV. If you're not thinking about that all the time, you're like, well, what and why does this matter? So we talk a lot about that and just like macro things that are going on in the company, and really focus on the team building aspect of it. And then that's also where we strategize. So we're looking at those KPIs that you saw like in the Venn diagram. That I'm like, this is the engine room. That's like the engine room meeting. And then whatever pivots, adjustments, new campaigns, whatever we want to do, that all gets brainstormed and solidified in that meeting. And then we roll it out in the Monday meeting to get really tactical on execution.
Love that. Those are like, I might start asking that question more often because I don't think sometimes we just really get into some of those tactical things. And
love
as
it.
marketers, we're all like trying to compare and think about. One last question we did have was around AI search. And Brendan, I do see it. I've had a lot of resources about AI search as far as like differences in how answer engines scan versus Google and things like that. However, Allyson, I know that third party is huge. Reviews are huge in LLMs. Sentiment is also huge. Those are both things that TrustRadius definitely can influence and help. And you mentioned that you're getting like 50,000, is that right? Calls to ChatGPT. Yeah, maybe just anything you want to add there about how you're talking to prospects, how you're seeing people ask about AI search from your end.
Yeah, I think, and everybody, that is familiar with TrustRadius is like the elephant in the room, Allison, is that traffic is going down, like direct traffic to TrustRadius, any review site, honestly, any publisher. We're seeing our traffic going down quite significantly. However, that doesn't mean that the content is not surfacing in those LLMs. And so while you're thinking about your content strategy, you should think about what you own on your properties and how that's going to become discoverable. And then two, other forums, review sites, Reddit, other communities, etc. Because going to your point around third party and how important that is, what you say on your own site needs to be reinforced by third parties, and that's going to increase your credibility. And that's something that the LLMs will pick up more.
For sure. We're doing a lot of push around third party as well, including nice segue. Next week, we're having Ross Simmons from Foundation Inc. He's going to be talking about Reddit and some of those pipeline shifts. So Brendan, definitely attend to that. Maria can drop the link in the chat. But Allyson, we thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We did go in so many different directions, but it was really helpful for me too, just to hear all that you're thinking about and going through and really how to align sales and marketing together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out, any questions. I'm trying to be a resource as much as possible. So thank you, Josh, so much. And thank you to the AirOps team. We're big fans, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Yeah, really appreciate it, everyone. We will see you next time, and we will get this recap out to you as well. So thanks again, everybody, for a great time.